again to the king's palace he asked the king if the princess should not at last be his, for now no one could say that the sun was not shining into the palace. But the other people in the palace had again stirred up the king, and he answered that the youth should have her, and that he had never intended that he should not. But first of all he must get her quite as good a horse to ride to the wedding on as that which he had himself. The youth said that the king had never told him he was to do that, and it seemed to him that he had now really earned the princess. But the king stuck to what he had said, and if the youth were unable to do it, he was to lose his life, the king said. The youth went down to the stable again, and very sad and sorrowful he was, as any one may well imagine. Then he told Dapplegrim that the king had now required that he should get the princess as good a bridal horse as that which the bridegroom had, or he should lose his life. But that will be no easy thing to do, said he, for your equal is not to be found in all the world. Oh yes, there is one to match me, said Dapplegrim, but it will not be easy to get him, for he is underground. However, we will try. Now you must go to the king and ask for new shoes for me, and for them we must again have 10 pounds of iron, 12 pounds of steel, and 2 smiths, one to hammer and one to hold. But be very particular to see that the hooks are very sharp. And you must also ask for 12 barrels of rye, and 12 slaughtered oxen we must have with us, and all the 12 oxen hides with 1200 spikes set in each of them. All these things we must have, likewise a barrel of tar with 12 tons of tar in it. The youth went to the king and asked for all the things that Dapplegrim had named, and once more, as the king thought that it would be disgraceful to refuse them to him, he obtained them all. So he mounted Dapplegrim and rode away from the court. And when he had ridden for a long, long time over hills and moors, Dapplegrim asked, "Do you hear anything?" "Yes, there is such a dreadful whistling up above in the air that I think I am growing alarmed," said the youth. "That is all the wild birds in the forest flying about. They are sent to stop us," said Dapplegrim. "But just cut a hole in the corn sacks, and then they will be so busy with the corn that they will forget us." The youth did it. He cut holes in the corn sacks, so that barley and rye ran out on every side, and all the wild birds that were in the forest came in such numbers that they darkened the sun. But when they caught sight of the corn, they could not refrain from it, but flew down and began to scratch and pick at the corn and rye. And at last they began to fight among themselves and forgot all about the youth and Dapplegrim and did them no harm. And now the youth rode onwards for a long, long time, over hill and dale, over rocky places and morasses, and then Dapplegrim began to listen again and asked the youth if he heard anything now. "Yes, now I hear such a dreadful crackling and crashing in the forest on every side that I think I shall be really afraid," said the youth. "That is all the wild beasts in the forest," said Dapplegrim. "They are sent to stop us. But just throw out the 12 carcasses of the oxen, and they will be so much occupied with them that they will quite forget us." So the youth threw out the carcasses of the oxen, and then all the wild beasts in the forest, both bears and wolves and lions and grim beasts of all kinds, came. But when they caught sight of the carcasses of the oxen, they began to fight for them till the blood flowed, and they entirely forgot Dapplegrim and the youth. So the youth rode onwards again, and many, many were the new scenes they saw, for travelling on Dapplegrim's back was not travelling slowly, as may be imagined. And then Dapplegrim neighed. "Do you hear anything?" he said. "Yes, I heard something like a foal neighing quite plainly, a long, long way off," answered the youth. "That's a full-grown colt," said Dapplegrim, "if you hear it so plainly when it is so far away from us." So they travelled onwards a long time, and saw one new scene after another once more. Then Dapplegrim neighed again. "Do you hear anything now?" he said. "Yes, now I heard it quite distinctly, and it neighed like a full-grown horse," answered the youth. "Yes, and you will hear it again very soon," said Dapplegrim, "and then you will hear what a voice it has." So they travelled on through many more different kinds of country, and then Dapplegrim neighed for a third time. But before he could ask the youth if he heard anything, there was such a neighing on the other side of the heath that the youth thought that the hills and rocks would be rent in pieces. "Now he is here," said Dapplegrim. "Be quick and fling over me the ox hides that have the spikes in them, and throw the 12 tons of tar over the field, and climb up into that great browse fir tree. When he comes, fire will spurt out of both his nostrils, and the tar will catch fire. Now mark what I said. If the flame ascends, I conquer, and if it stinks, I fail. But if you see that I am winning, fling the bridle, which you must take off me, over his head, and then he will become quite gentle." Just as the youth had flung all the hides with the spikes over Dapplegrim, and the tar over the field, and had got safely up into the spruce fir, the horse came with flames spouting from his nostrils, and the tar caught fire in a moment, and Dapplegrim and the horse began to fight, until the stones leapt up to the sky. They bit and they fought with their forelegs and their hind legs, and sometimes the youth looked at them, and sometimes he looked at the tar. But at last the flames began to rise, for wheresoever the strange horse bit, or wheresoever he kicked, he hit upon the spikes in the hides, and at length he had to yield. When the youth saw that, he was not long in getting down from the tree and flinging the bridle over the horse's head, and then he became so tame that he might have been led by a thin string. This horse was dappled too, and so like Dapplegrim that no one could distinguish one from the other. The youth seated himself on the dappled horse, which he had captured, and rode home again to the king's palace, and Dapplegrim ran loose by his side. When he got there, the king was standing outside in the courtyard. "Can you tell me which is the horse I have caught, and which is the one I had before?" said the youth. "If you can't, I think your daughter is mine." And the king went and looked at both the dappled horses. He looked high and he looked low, and looked before and looked behind, but there was not a hair's difference between the two. "No," said the king, "that I cannot tell thee. As thou hast procured such a splendid bridal horse for my daughter, thou shalt have her. But first we must have one more trial, just to see if thou are fated to have her. She shall hide herself twice, and then thou shalt hide thyself twice. If thou canst find her each time that she hides herself, and if she cannot find thee in thy hiding places, then it is fated, and thou shalt have the princess." "That, too, was not in our bargain," said the youth, "but we will make this trial since it must be so." So the king's daughter was to hide herself first. Then she changed herself into a duck and lay swimming in a lake that was just outside the palace. But the youth went down into the stable and asked Dapplegrim what she had done with herself. "Oh, all that you have to do is to take your gun and go down to the water and aim at the duck which is swimming about there, and she shall soon discover herself," said Dapplegrim. The youth snatched up his gun and ran to the lake. "I will just have to shoot at that duck," said he, and began to aim at it. "Oh no, dear friend, don't shoot. It is I," said the princess. So he had found her once. The second time the princess changed herself into a loaf, and laid herself on the table among 4 other loaves, and she was so like the other loaves that no one could see any difference between them. But the youth again went down to the stable to Dapplegrim and told him that the princess had hidden herself again, and that he had not the least idea what had become of her. "Oh, just take a very large bread knife, sharpen it, and pretend that you are going to cut straight through the third of the 4 loaves which are lying on the kitchen table in the king's palace. Count them from the right to the left, and you will soon find her," said Dapplegrim. So the youth went up to the kitchen and began to sharpen the longest bread knife that he could find. Then he caught hold of the 3rd loaf on the left-hand side and put the knife to it as if he meant to cut it straight in two. "I will have a bit of this bread for myself," said he. "No, dear friend, don't cut. It is I," said the princess again. So he found her the second time. And now it was his turn to go and hide himself, but Dapplegrim had given him such good instructions that it was not easy to find him. First he turned himself into a horsefly and hid himself in Dapplegrim's left nostril. The princess went poking about and searching everywhere, high and low, and wanted to go into Dapplegrim's stall too. But he began to bite and kick about so that she was afraid to go there, and could not find the youth. "Well," said she, "as I am unable to find you, you must show yourself." Whereupon the youth immediately appeared standing there on the stable floor. Dapplegrim told him what he was to do the second time, and he turned himself into a lump of earth, and stuck himself between the hoof and the shoe of Dapplegrim's left forefoot. Once more the king's daughter went and sought everywhere, inside and outside, until at last she came into the stable and wanted to go into the stall beside Dapplegrim. So this time he allowed her to go into it, and she peered about high and low, but she could not look under his hoofs, for he stood much too firmly on his legs for that, and she could not find the youth. "Well, you will just have to show where you are yourself, for I cannot find you," said the princess, and in an instant the youth was standing by her side on the floor of the stable. "Now you are mine," he said to the princess. "Now you can see that it is fated that she should be mine," he said to the king. "Yes, it is fated," said the king. "So what must be must." Then everything was made ready for the wedding with great splendor and promptitude, and the youth rode to church on Dapplegrim and the king's daughter on the other horse. So everyone must see that they could not be long on their way thither. From J. Moe. CHAPTER 25.